Look at a $100 bill. To most, it is the undisputed king of global trade, a symbol of stability, and the ultimate store of value. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Why does a piece of linen and cotton, printed by a nation buried under $34 trillion of debt, still hold the power to dictate the fate of 8 billion souls? The answer is not found in the halls of the Federal Reserve or the textbooks of mainstream economics. It is hidden in a secret pact signed in the shadows of the 1970s oil crisis. A pact that turned the American dollar into a global vampire, feeding on the energy output of every nation on Earth. But in 2026, the silence has been broken. The thread that held this grand illusion together is fraying. From the desert palaces of Riyadh to the high-tech corridors of Shanghai, the world is preparing for a funeral. The funeral of the petrodollar. This is not just a financial shift, it is the final chapter of a 500-year saga of Western dominance. Today, on Macro History, we peel back the layers of the most successful geopolitical heist in human history. We will explore the Achilles heel of the modern empire and witness the violent birth of the multipolar order. Welcome to the end of the world as you know it. To understand the collapse of 2026, we must first travel back to 1971. The world was in chaos. The post-World War II order, known as the Bretton Woods system, was disintegrating. For decades, the dollar had been backed by gold. If you held dollars, you held a claim on the gold vaults of Fort Knox. But the Vietnam War and massive social spending had drained the American coffers. When the world realized the US was printing more paper than it had gold, the bank run began. In a moment of desperation that would change history forever, President Richard Nixon slammed the gold window shut. With a single televised address, the dollar became a fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith and credit. For a moment, it looked like the American empire was finished. Inflation skyrocketed, the stock market crashed, and the geopolitical rivals of the US began to circle like vultures. The dollar was dying. Enter Henry Kissinger. In 1974, the mastermind of American realpolitik flew to Saudi Arabia with a proposal that was as brilliant as it was diabolical. The deal was simple. The United States would provide total military protection for the House of Saud. They would guarantee the survival of the kingdom against all threats, internal and external. In exchange, Saudi Arabia would do one thing. They would price every single drop of their oil exclusively in US dollars. Furthermore, they would invest their surplus oil profits back into US Treasury bonds. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Think about the magnitude of this achievement. Every country in the world needs energy to survive. To buy that energy from the world's largest exporter, they first had to buy US dollars. This created a permanent, artificial, and global demand for the American currency. It didn't matter if the US economy was struggling. It didn't matter if they printed trillions of new notes. As long as the world needed oil, the world needed dollars. For 50 years, this was the ultimate cheat code of history. It allowed the United States to run infinite deficits, fund a global military machine with 800 bases, and maintain a standard of living far beyond its means. Every time a factory in Germany bought oil or a farmer in India fueled his tractor, they were unknowingly paying a tax to the American empire. The dollar wasn't just money anymore. It was the oxygen of the global economy. But every empire eventually falls into the trap of its own success. The Americans began to believe the petrodollar was a natural law, like gravity. They forgot that the Pact of 1974 was built on a foundation of mutual interest and, more importantly, fear. By 2026, that fear has evaporated. The House of Saud, once the most loyal vassal of the dollar, has begun to look east. The rise of China as the world's largest oil importer has created a new reality. Why should Riyadh sell its soul to a declining power in Washington when its biggest customer is in Beijing? The cracks began as small tremors. A yuan-denominated oil contract here, a gold-backed trade settlement there. But in the current era, these tremors have become an earthquake. The Achilles heel has been struck. And as we will see in the next part, the very weapons the West used to protect its hegemony are now being turned against it. The greatest mistake any hegemon can make is to mistake a privilege for a weapon. For decades, the US dollar functioned as a neutral utility, a global commons that facilitated trade between friends and foes alike. But in the early 2020s, Washington committed an act of financial seppuku by freezing the foreign exchange reserves of major sovereign nations and disconnecting rivals from the SWIFT system. The United States sent a chilling message to every central bank on the planet. Your money is only yours as long as you obey our foreign policy. This was the grand awakening for the global South. From Brasilia to New Delhi, finance ministers realized that the dollar was no longer a safe haven. It was a political leash. If you don't align with the rules-based order, your national wealth can be vaporized with a single keystroke in New York. This arrogance accelerated a trend that would have otherwise taken decades. The Great Diversification. In 2026, we are witnessing the emergence of the non-dollar zone. This is not a conspiracy. It is a survival instinct. Nations are no longer asking if they should de-dollarize, but how fast they can do it. The BRICS bloc, now expanded to include the heavyweights of energy and manufacturing, has moved beyond mere rhetoric. They are building an alternative financial architecture, a digital, multi-currency ledger that bypasses Western gatekeepers entirely. But the real black swan of 2026 is the return of hard money. For 50 years, the world accepted IOU notes from Washington today. The world wants tangible assets. We are seeing the rise of commodity-backed currencies. Imagine a trade system where the settlement is not based on a fiat currency printed at will, but on a basket of gold, oil, rare earth minerals, and grain. This is the nightmare scenario for the petrodollar because it renders the U.S. Treasury market irrelevant. Why is this the Achilles heel? Because the American empire is built on debt. The U.S. government relies on the rest of the world to buy its bonds to fund its massive budget deficits. For half a century, the petrodollar forced nations to recycle their oil profits into these bonds. It was a closed loop. But if the loop breaks, if Saudi Arabia accepts yuan, if India pays in rupees, if Russia trades in gold, then who will buy the American debt? The answer is terrifying. No one, except the Federal Reserve itself. This leads to a death spiral. To keep the government running, the Fed must print more money to buy the debt that no one else wants. This floods the world with even more dollars at a time when global demand for dollars is collapsing. The result? A domestic hyperinflationary shock that the West hasn't seen in modern history. The American public has been told for generations that their exorbitant privilege was a result of their exception. They were never told it was a subsidy paid by the rest of the world through the petrodollar system. As that subsidy vanishes, the social contract in the West begins to tear. The cost of maintaining an empire of 800 bases becomes unbearable when you can no longer pay for it with exported inflation. In this part of our journey, we see that the decline of the West is not just about the rise of China or the military maneuvers in Eurasia. It is about a loss of trust. Trust is the only thing that gives a fiat currency value, and once trust is weaponized, it is destroyed forever. The 1974 Blood Oath was a contract of trust and protection. In 2026, the protection is seen as a threat, and the trust has been replaced by a frantic search for an exit. As we move into Part 3, we will look at the specific front lines of this transition. We will analyze the silent war for the world's S-gold vaults and the secret digital currency projects that are currently nuking the dominance of the Federal Reserve. The transition to a multipolar world is no longer a forecast. It is an active, unfolding reality. While the world's attention is captured by the kinetic theater of border conflicts and diplomatic spats, a much deeper and more permanent war is being fought in the invisible realm of fiber optic cables and central bank ledgers. This is the war for the financial plumbing of the 21st century. For decades, the West held a monopoly on this plumbing through the SWIFT system. It was the check-in desk of the global economy. If you were banned, you were effectively erased from the modern world. But in 2026, the monopoly has been broken. Enter the mBridge project and the rise of CBDC's central bank digital currencies designed specifically for cross-border settlements. This is not Bitcoin or the volatile cryptocurrencies of the retail market. This is institutional digital steel, led by the Bank for International Settlements in collaboration with China, Thailand, and the UAE. This system allows nations to trade directly with one another in seconds, bypassing the New York banking system entirely. When a trade occurs on the digital Silk Road, the US dollar is not just bypassed, it is invisible. There is no need for a correspondent bank in Manhattan to approve the transaction. There is no settlement risk. Most importantly, there is no sanction risk. This is the technical execution of the de-dollarization dream. It is the construction of a parallel universe where the economic gravity of the United States no longer pulls on the rest of the planet. As the digital infrastructure rises, we are also witnessing a frantic return to the ancient king, gold. In 2026, the movement of gold from the west to the east has reached a fever pitch. Central banks in the global south are no longer satisfied with gold certificates. Stored in the basements of the London bullion market or the New York Fed, they are demanding physical delivery. They are bringing their bars home. Why this obsession with a yellow metal in a digital age? Because gold is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. It cannot be frozen. It cannot be printed into oblivion. It is the ultimate reset button. By accumulating massive gold reserves, the BRICS nations are preparing a golden anchor for their new currency units. They are creating a floor for the new multipolar order, psychological and mathematical. Guarantee that the new system will not repeat the inflationary sins of the old one. The numbers are staggering. While the Western media focuses on the quarterly earnings of Silicon Valley, the real economy nations are quietly cornering the market on the things that actually matter: energy, minerals, and bullion. This is the great realignment. The West specialized in the symbolic economy, derivatives, debt, and digital ads. The East has spent the last 2 decades mastering the physical economy. In 2026, these two worlds are colliding. The symbolic economy of the West is hitting a wall of reality. You cannot build a missile with a derivative. You cannot power a city with a stock buyback. And you certainly cannot sustain an empire when your currency is being replaced by a digital gold-backed alternative that is faster, cheaper, and safer for the other 85% of humanity. This shift represents the end of monetary colonialism. For half a century, the world was forced to sell its real goods, labor, oil, and steel for paper dollars that the U.S. could print for free. It was the greatest wealth transfer in human history. But the colonized have built their own bank. They have built their own roads, and in the next part, we will see how this new reality is forcing a great contraction within the borders of the hegemon itself. The Achilles heel is no longer just a vulnerability, it is a gaping wound. The petrodollar was the shield that protected the American consumer from the consequences of their nation's debt. As that shield shatters, the real world is finally coming home to America. History teaches us that the cost of maintaining an empire always grows, while the base that supports it eventually shrinks. This is the imperial overstretch. In 2026, the United States finds itself in a precarious position where its military commitments are expanding. Just as its primary source of funding, the global willingness to hold dollars is evaporating. When the petrodollar subsidy ends, the American empire doesn't just lose influence abroad, it loses the ability to maintain social peace at home. For decades, the exorbitant privilege allowed Washington to export its inflation. When the Federal Reserve printed money, those dollars flowed out into the global system, absorbed by central banks and oil markets. This kept prices relatively stable for the American consumer, despite a ballooning money supply. But as the world rejects the dollar, those trillions of offshore dollars are beginning to come home. They are looking for something real to buy land companies and resources, driving domestic prices to levels that the average citizen can no longer afford. This is the great contraction. We are witnessing the hollowed-out middle class of the West realizing that their standard of living was, in part, a geopolitical mirage. The 500-year era of Western dominance was characterized by the ability to command the world's resources through financial engineering. As the multipolar world establishes its own pricing power, the West is forced into a brutal internal devaluation. The political consequences are explosive. A hegemon in decline rarely goes quietly into the night. It becomes paranoid, erratic, and prone to financial protectionism. In 2026, we see the rise of economic iron curtains, trade wars, investment bans, and the frantic onshoring of industries that were outsourced decades ago. But you cannot recreate a century of industrial capacity overnight with a fiat currency that is losing its purchasing power. The Achilles heel is now vibrating with the stress of a system under maximum pressure. The U.S. Treasury market, once the deepest and most liquid pool of capital in history, is showing signs of arteriosclerosis. With foreign central banks no longer acting as the buyer of last resort, the Federal Reserve is forced to step in to prevent a total collapse of the bond market. This is yield curve control. in all but name a desperate measure that traditionally precedes the final stage of currency debasement. While the West turns inward, grappling with societal polarization and crumbling infrastructure, the rest of the world is busy building. This is the ultimate irony of 2026. The very nations that were once dismissed as emerging markets are now the ones providing the stability and growth that the global economy craves. They are moving from rule takers to rule makers. They are no longer waiting for permission from Washington or London to trade, to build, or to dream. The petrodollar was the ultimate soft power tool. It made the American way of life the global aspiration. But power that is based on a financial monopoly is fragile. Power based on the control of the physical economy, on the actual flow of energy, grain, and microchips is resilient. As the petrodollar dies, we are seeing the transition from a virtual hegemony to a physical multipolarity. In the final part of our analysis, we will look at the new map. What does the world look like after the dust settles? How do you survive and thrive in a century where the old rules no longer apply? The era of the single pole is over. The era of the many has begun. We are not merely witnessing the decline of a currency. We are witnessing the shattering of a 500-year-old mirror. Since the age of discovery, the West has looked into that mirror and seen the center of the universe. It dictated the language of commerce, the definitions of freedom, and the price of survival. But in 2026, the mirror is in pieces. The world that emerges from the wreckage of the petrodollar is not a single unified bloc, but a multipolar archipelago, a series of sovereign power centers, each with its own gravity, its own digital ledger, and its own cultural North Star. The Achilles heel of the old empire was its belief in its own eternity. It assumed that the world would forever trade its physical reality for Western digital promises. That era is gone. The new supercycle belongs to those who control the atoms, not just the bits. It belongs to the nations that can feed their people, power their factories, and protect their borders without asking for permission from a centralized global bank. For the average citizen of the world, this transition is terrifying. But it is also a moment of profound macro enlightenment. We are learning that wealth is not a number on a screen in Manhattan. It is the ability to produce, to innovate, and to cooperate. The fall of the petrodollar is the great reset of reality. It forces us to look at the world as it actually is, a complex, diverse, and competitive landscape where no single nation has a monopoly on the truth or the future. As we conclude this journey on macro history, we must recognize that history does not move in a straight line. It moves in circles. The 1974 Blood Oath was a temporary fix for a dying system. It lasted 50 years, a blink of an eye in the grand scale of civilizations. Today, the bill has come due. The invisible thread has snapped. But in every collapse, there is the seed of a new beginning. The multipolar world offers a chance for a more balanced global equilibrium, a world where the global south is no longer a peripheral resource colony, but a central engine of human progress. It is a world where competition is fierce, but where the rules-based order is replaced by a reality-based order. The question is no longer, when will the dollar fall? The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Because the 500-year Western hegemony was the anomaly. The multipolar world is the historical norm. We are macro history. We don't just tell you what happened, we show you the patterns that determine what will happen next. The transition of 2026 is the greatest wealth and power shift in human history. Don't be a victim of the old illusion. Watch the patterns, follow the energy, understand the gold. Which currency or asset do you believe will anchor the next century? Will it be a digital yuan, a basket of BRICS, commodities, or a return to a pure golden standard? The floor is yours. Let us know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the Achilles heel of empires valuable, subscribe and join our community of global thinkers. The truth is often hidden in plain sight, buried under the headlines. We are here to dig it up.